Okay, it's on, yeah. Okay, so yes, I'm going to talk about Xmp metadata for HDF5. This work was motivated by the kind of work of sorting data similar to when you want to sort your photo album in your computer file browser. If you have thumbnail previews, the whole thing gets much, much easier. At the same time, metadata kind of fits into the same category where you have key value pairs and you can have some critical data that's saved with the files. When a user group comes to my beamline and measures a bunch of microscope images, they go away with a list of files which look something like this. Not very descriptive. It's just an image with a number on it. What I would like to give them is this kind of experience, where they have the same HDF5 files, but the file browser recognizes them, knows how to grab some information, and then displays it. And of course, the same works not just in Windows, but in KDE, and also Mac OS and Genome. And this is using Xmp, the Extensible Metadata Platform, which is a standard designed by Adobe, and it's ISO standard now. This is published. They talk of exactly how they do all of this stuff. How they combine it into each file is a little bit different for each file type because they have their own architectures, but this is very, very broadly used in lots of file types that everyone recognizes from day-to-day working with computers and media, what have you. Basically, you have an XML string that contains all the data, and this is either inserted into the file or you put it into a sidecar file with the same file name but with .xmp as the extension. So each operating system or desktop environment has a plugin system designed to do this kind of work. All you have to do is write the plugin that tells the file system how to recognize the information and transfer the relevant parts to the other parts of the file system which can know how to handle them. So we looked at different ways of including this kind of data, and if we put it into the HDF5 file itself, then you need the HDF5 libraries to get it out again. But another way to do it is to put it into the user block. Does everyone here know about the user block in HDF5? You do, yes. Or how many people here have not heard about the user block before? Okay. Quite a few. Okay, so basically it's kind of header space. The HDF5 file says, I start here with a bit of a string, and then it says, oh, but I'm not going to do anything for a little bit of space before I start doing the actual stuff that I want to write. And when you create an HDF5 file, you should tell it how much of this user space to leave, and H5Py also has this functionality in it. So I was very surprised to see you put up your hand. So the declaration that HDF5 used to say that they're starting looks a lot like this. It's here HDF, but because we're putting in XML data, XMP data, we adjusted it to be HMP. So once you get past the HDF5 sort of header string and you get into the user block, then our plugin system looks for this string. And then after that, there will be a declaration of how much space is being used for this XMP block. And so then someone else can also use something in the XMP, in the user block, and we won't step on each other's feet. Has anyone heard of anyone else using the user block for something? You have? Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it's a fairly rare occurrence because there's not so much.
Mission, NPT mission satellites, they have the whole user block. It is XML format. and the full description of the product that is signed, so they can extract a user block and they know what the product is.
Okay.
Another thing that we just kind of did for fun several years ago was we stuffed HDF view into the user block.
Oh.
So that you could click on that and it would automatically open and view the file that you're looking at. So,
that's very fancy. Cool. Yeah.
That feature or a virus?
Well, it's never a virus.
Why not both?
The file is huge, so you're going to take up that much space relatively. But yeah, you can use that for anything. And I really like your idea that you can use it for more than one thing. Yeah, very good.
So the XML block that Xmp wants looks something like this. The implementation that we're using is just stuffing in the metadata key value pairs just without any hierarchy at the moment. But I think we should probably do some work in sorting out some kind of standard for what people should be wanting to look for, because I'm sure lots of people are interested in things being done in a standard way, not just the chair of a standards organization. And then the thumbnail data itself, you declare the format of the image that you're putting in. In our case, where we do use PNG pretty much all the way. There are a few others that are supported, like JPEG, but it depends a little bit on the operating system as to which ones it will accept. So I would recommend sticking with PNG all the way, unless you have a good reason otherwise. And then the image data is just encoded in base64, so just an ASCII string, and it gets stuffed in there as well. And the plugins for the different operating systems, they know to look in the HDF5 file, read through the user block to find this, and then they read and interpret the XML and then pass on the preview image. It's not actually doing anything with the metadata key value pairs at the moment, because that doesn't seem to be very standardized in the operating systems at the moment. So there's a bit more work that needs to be done to figure out what we really want to display there and how it should be displayed. So I kind of left that alone and thought this is a prototype implementation to just get things started. So we have implemented plugins for Windows, which works in Windows 7, 8.1, and 10. Mac OS, Genome, and KDE4. So if you go to the Nexus format GitHub, the HDF5 XMP repository is where I put the code. This isn't really official Nexus stuff. It was just a place I had to dump something, and Nexus wasn't really against it. So there we have the code. If you look at the releases page, you can find binaries for the thumbnailers, so you can try it out really quickly. And there's also Python scripts for inserting the images and metadata, and also extracting them out again to see what you have in there. And we don't do anything about how to interpret the contents of the HDF file to create the image that you want to use as your preview. This is something which I think is best left to the people creating the files, because everyone's doing different things. So it's a very general implementation, and I just wrote a script for my own files that I'm producing, because I know what they are, just to interpret whatever data in there as a 2D image, and then to put that in as the file preview as I showed at the beginning. And with that, I'd like to thank Mark Schäderli from Semaphore AG, who did the programming, and the Swiss Light Source, who did some funding for the programmer. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Yes?
What do you do if so you create your HDF5 file, you say, okay, I want to have like this size of a block for my thumbnail image. What do you do if you have like created a file and you want to have like a more high resolution image or stuff like that? I mean, you basically have to recreate the HDF5 file, or can you grow a user block?
So growing the user block is tricky. I think these people.
There is a tool that ungems, it removes the user block, and there is another tool that gems new user block, because user block is in front of HDF5 logical file space. Yeah. So line is 6 to 0, then 512, then power of 2 to find signature. This is where HDF5 space starts, but that first space is reserved for user block. And it's called H5 gem and H5 ungemmed.
But for big files, this is possibly a lot of work, I guess. Yeah. So the alternative, if you have big files that are archived that you don't want to rewrite, is to have the sidecar file. So then it's just basically a text file with the XML block in it, and the plugins will see that next to the other file and say, oh, okay, that's where I get the metadata and the thumbnail preview, and apply it to the file next to it. Of course, it's not ideal because you can easily get the two separated, but it's a good workaround.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it. How do you choose what you thumbnail? Is that the default type or something?
Whatever you want it to be. I did not try to code that at all. I leave that entirely up to everyone else to figure out for themselves.
Yeah, I was wondering if you would have some kind of very smart code that would look through the data sets, fine-tuning data set, put a slice of that data set, merge an image, and then do a thumbnail.
Yeah, do it like. Yeah,
sure. Sure.
And
it's possible.
Is, was there anything particular about the message format that is easier, or could this same kind of thing be applied to generic HDF5?
Well, something generic could be done for Nexus because it has this concept of a default plot. What makes it a bit trickier is there's nothing saying how many dimensions this default plot has, and if it doesn't have 2, how to make it into 2. So you'd be doing some guesswork, and it's clearly not going to work for every single possibility, but you could do something that works for a lot of people. But I think the preview is best created when the file is created, and whoever's creating the file has a pretty good idea of how to interpret that. So I think it's probably best to leave it up to people creating files to do that themselves. What we could do to make life easier is these plugins, because they don't need the HDF5 library, they're very small, so we can get them included in the operating systems by default, especially Linux should be quite easy. And maybe the HDF5 library could have a function built into it that would insert this kind of stuff in the user block. So then all the tools that people need to have this experience are just already there. But I wouldn't go further than that.
So I think already just making people aware of the system is like,
Yeah.
more than half the work. Is this the same way Windows does it? Or?
Yeah, this is using the exact system that the operating systems use for image formats like PNG, JPEG, GIF. That's the exact same system. They have this XML block embedded in the file with a preview, which does not necessarily match the actual image data. And then the operating system knows how to grab that, and then it will just present it using its standard machinery.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nick.